experience more environmental pollution than others. And those same communities also tend to have less environmental benefits, like green space and trees that cool and clean the air, soak up stormwater runoff, and provide relief from the effects of extreme heat. We know that environmental justice comes in many forms and that they span across every region of our state, including in dense and in urban places like here in Newark, but also in suburban and rural communities. Environmental injustices occur in inland communities, but also those along our Jersey Shore, rivers, and bays. In Essex County, communities are contending with some of the most egregious examples of environmental injustice in the state and also the entire country, including the density of contaminated sites due to the legacy of industry in the region, multiple pollution generating facilities like power plants, an incinerator, and multiple junkyards, the overwhelming number of truck traffic from the sea and airport, and multiple warehouses, sewage backing up into residents' basements and waterways due to combined sewer systems, concerns over lead poisoning in our young people, the lack of trees and open space to provide shade and opportunities for recreation, continuous flooding, illegal dumping, and many other issues that I'm sure we'll hear more about tonight. And so this is why we are here on the next stop of our environmental justice community engagement tour, because it is so important for government to hear directly from those of you who are most impacted and we'll have more stops on our tour before the year's end. And our goal is to meet with overburdened residents across every corner of our state. So I just want to give a special thanks to the Newark Public Library for hosting us today. Also a special thanks to Kim Gaddy and Nikki Sheets, I don't know if you're still in the room, for being our host and our tour guides, touring us around to different places in the area earlier today. So our agenda is pretty simple. In a minute, I'm going to hand the floor over to you all to ask a question or say your comment to let us know about your experiences with environmental injustice in Essex County. But before I pass it over to you, I'll give you a few instructions on how this is going to go. I want to pass the mic over to my two panelists to give us some opening remarks. So Commissioner Latourette.
Well, thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Oh, I've not even tried it. Well, there we go. How's that? Can you hear me okay? Oh, it's loud. All right, I'm loud enough to begin with, so I'll place the microphone a little bit further away so that I don't completely overwhelm the space with my voice. But I want to thank everyone who's joined us this evening here in person in this historic building. I want to thank the folks who are also joining us virtually online. Candace will have some instructions for you all so that we make sure that we hear and see you as well. For those I've not had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Sean Latourette. I have the real honor of serving our state as its Commissioner of Environmental Protection. And in New Jersey, the Department of Environmental Protection does a lot of different things. We are your environmental quality governance agency. We oversee the good care of our water resources and our land-based resources, ensuring that we clean up our air and protect our residents from further air pollution. But we also oversee other things, including our state park system, our fish and wildlife. We invest in green and open spaces all around the state of New Jersey. We invest in water infrastructure, for example, helping folks to get clean water. We plan for climate resilience and make investments in communities to help beat back the increasing flood risks that our residents face, and so much more. We have a broad approach to environmental protection and natural resource management and improvement in the state of New Jersey, but we can't really do that work well sitting in our government offices in Trenton or other places in the state where we're located. We can do that work best by engaging directly on the ground in the communities that we so want to serve and help improve upon. And so that's why we're here this evening, because we want to hear directly from residents in Essex County about the lived experience of your environment, because that's what it is. It's your environment. It's just our job to protect it for you, to improve upon it for you. So we need to know more about how you experience it so that we can integrate that into policy making and how we evaluate permitting decisions and things of that nature. So I thank you all again for being here and glad that we always have the partnership of our federal agency, our federal counterpart in the Environmental Protection Agency. So I'll pass it to my friend and colleague, Regional Administrator Lisa Garcia.
Thank you so much. It is always great to. Here we go. Oh, okay. Thank you again. It's always great to be here in New Jersey with the commission. Oh. Is it on? Oh. We celebrate. Oh, that's really loud. You're right. Making sure that we do this work together. As the commissioner said, obviously we are we help to be stewards of the environment, but this is really about listening to communities and being present. And so I just want to also say thank you to Kim Gaddy and to Nikki Sheets and to the other community members who have over the years put together the EJ tour that we took earlier to see and to smell and to and to breathe in some of the real environmental issues and degradation and some of the kind of impacts that the community is feeling, sensing, and living with. And I also want to thank, obviously, our EPA colleagues who are here who make this happen every day also. And Asada Rashidi, who is the newest member of, or a member of one of the newest advisory councils that we have at EPA, our Youth Advisory Council. So congratulations again for representing New Jersey on this nationwide advisory council. Just having the youth represented, our youth represented is so important. So it's great to see you here and continuing that work. And as the commissioner mentioned, we continue to partner on all of these issues. It's really important that you see the state and federal government working together to really address the issues of environmental justice. And so we like to go out to communities, listen, and then come back together and figure out how is it that we can work together. And I always appreciate Candace helping to kick these off and help plan these. So thank you so much. I'll just mention a few things just to kick it off as an update maybe. But one is, obviously, we'd like to congratulate New Jersey on the New Jersey EJ law. It's 1 year, is it? Almost 1 year?
Yeah,
Kind of. And that's really leading the country in showcasing how states can legislate environmental justice. One of the things that we used to always say, certainly as lawyers, is there is no environmental justice statute or law that we can just showcase and bring into a court of law. And so New Jersey has changed that, and now other states are following suit. The other things I wanted to mention was that we, as we were going around on the tour, we were looking at some of the Superfund sites. And so Passaic River is one of the longest, I think, Superfund sites with the cleanup from diamond alkali. It's called the Diamond Alkali Superfund site, but Diamond Alkali was there and obviously contaminated the river. But EPA is continuing to oversee the progress that's being made there. And it includes a soon-to-be released final design for the cleanup of the lower 8.3 miles of the Passaic River section. And so I just wanted to mention that because that's going to be coming out later this week. We're going to be presenting it to the community advisory group, which is really important to to talk about that once again, engage with the community and talk about the issues. And so thank you again to the team that's working on it and to the community that's engaged on the Passaic River. And so with that, I will turn it over. There's a few other updates on grants, but we can talk about that as we answer questions. So I will turn it over to another guest we have here, Alex Zalagi, sorry, Assistant United States Attorney with the United States Attorney Office for the District of New Jersey. Do you want, here, you can use this mic. Alex has been joining in these community meetings, which is really great, again, to showcase the partnership and how we each have a role, but it's important that we all show up and listen to figure out what we can do and take back to work together. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I want to make a quick pitch and an introduction. I am an Assistant United States Attorney. I'm an attorney for the Department of Justice in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey. We have offices in Newark, in Trenton, and in Camden. But most importantly, I'm the Environmental Justice Coordinator, who is the lead of an environmental justice team. That's a team of attorneys at the Department of Justice here in New Jersey who help enforce the federal environmental laws in federal court here. We've started this initiative about a year and a half ago, and we are now making sure that members of the community know that we're here, understand what we do, and most importantly, know how to reach us, because we do our job well when the community talks to us about the health and safety of their neighborhoods, of their streets, of their buildings, and we handle things big and small. We are involved in the Diamond Alkali Superfund site that Lisa mentioned, big all the way down to individual issues on an apartment by apartment basis. Take lead, for example. Lead in apartments, lead poisoning, that may be something that an individual tenant may not think is a federal issue, but it sure may be. And we want you to know that we are here. We have a complaint reporting hotline, email, form, snail mail, telephone. It all goes directly to me. And, we get it out to our team. And so we are happy to talk to you about your concerns. If we can help you, we will. If not, we will make sure that we loop in the folks who are better suited to help you on a particular state issue, local issue, or a federal issue. So thank you again for giving me a few minutes to say hello. I'll be here, and afterwards, I'd be happy to talk to anybody who has any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. I also want to just give the floor to Aaron Kleinbaum, if you would want to say a few words. So Aaron is our state equivalent of the Justice Department in New Jersey at the Attorney General's office.
Thanks. Alex, nice to meet you. I'm at the New Jersey equivalent of the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm with the New Jersey Attorney General, Matt Platkin, who was here in Newark on Saturday meeting with Kim and her group in the South Ward. We too, another resource, another legal resource. Last week, we just issued 5 or 6 legal complaints seeking enforcement in overburdened communities throughout New Jersey. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've done this. We've done it every year, and we look forward to feedback from the community. I'm here to listen, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, so a few instructions for you to kick us off and get us started with the discussion. So I'm just going to ask folks to form a line at the mic, which is to my left, your right. If you're able, if you're unable, just raise your hand and we can bring the mic around to you. And so we'll just take your question or comment person by person. Also, if you are online, we are monitoring the chat. So there's a few ways that you can get involved in today's discussion. You can put your question or your comment in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature. It should be in the bottom, either left or right-hand corner of your Zoom controls. If you click on the hand to raise your hand, we'll be able to see you and we'll call on you to unmute yourself and say your question or your comment out loud. For those of you who have dialed in, so you're not online, but you're listening on the phone, to get into the queue to ask your comment or question, you want to dial *9 if you're on the phone, and that will indicate to us that you're raising your hand via the phone, and we'll be able to call on you that way as well. Just one last point that's really important, that I just want to say a reminder that today's session is to focus on environmental justice in Essex County, and specifically those residents from overburdened communities in Essex County. So I'll just read that list off. It's Belleville, Bloomfield, Caldwell, Cedar Grove, Orange, East Orange, Fairfield, Glen Ridge, Irvington, Livingston, Maplewood, Milburn, Montclair, Newark, Nutley, and South Orange. So we want to prioritize and yield the floor to those residents from those communities first. If you're not from any of those communities I just read off, if there's time at the end, we'll try to make time for you, or we'll stay afterwards and we can talk offline. But we're going to yield the floor to residents of overburdened communities in Essex County first. Okay, so thank you for that. And West Orange, I don't think I said that, South Orange, West Orange. Okay, and so we're ready to begin. If someone wants to be our brave volunteer to go first, we welcome you to the mic.
First is always on. The first one always gets you going, so it is appropriate that Miss Gaddy is stepping to the microphone.
Kim Gaddy, Executive Director of the Southward Environmental Alliance. First of all, I want to thank you, Lisa, Sean, Candace, and all your staff for coming to the great city of Newark, New Jersey. You know, our city is disproportionately polluted upon by so many pollutant facilities here in the state. So I first want to commend you for always standing with us to address these issues. And then most importantly, as we approach the month of May, and you know, it's asthma, World Asthma Day is May 7th. And as a parent of children with asthma, air quality is extremely important to us. We are working with Black carbon monitors now, and purple air monitors in the South Ward, and the Newark Green Team and Environmental Commission has purple air monitors throughout the city. And we would just like to lift that up and see how we can hold some of these more polluting facilities accountable to the air emissions. And so specifically, air concerns is something that we want to address. And we are seeking the continual support of both the EPA and the DEP to address our concerns. And we're looking at zero emission zones, preferably where we can reroute, you know, the hot, heavy amount of trucks that come in our neighborhoods, as you've seen today from the tour, and any other recommendations and suggestions you have along those lines, because the community is ready and willing to support. And all we want to do is be in collaboration and partnership with you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Kim. You know, for those assembled here, you probably all know Kim a long time, or have become familiar with the Southward Environmental Alliance. One of the points of assistance that Kim and team helped with this afternoon was to organize and offer a perspective on this tour that we took around some particularly troubling areas that pose air and water pollution concerns that give us a greater perspective, quite honestly, on how we could go about doing our work, whether that is in the scientific realm, from a monitoring and measurement and reporting perspective with respect to air pollutants, or in from a grant making perspective, right? So how do we best calibrate the New Jersey Stop the Soot program, where we're taking resources, part federal, part state, in partnership with Lisa and her team to get some of the dirtiest, most offensive equipment replaced. or upgraded such that it's less of a burden to the health and well-being of our communities, and helps us understand baseline conditions from a facility siting and operations permitting perspective as well. So deeply, deeply helpful, and I really, really appreciate it. Let's see if Lisa has any thoughts or reflections. I know there's a lot of work that EPA has been doing and a lot of new opportunity for helping our community-based organizations and the people in our communities to access resources for these types of endeavors that Kim is talking about with respect to air monitoring and improvements.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do think that the tour was really helpful as a reminder, because I know you've taken me on this tour many, many times, but it was really a helpful reminder on how we combine some of the work that we're doing with air monitoring in communities, and also obviously the heavy duty vehicles and truck work, because I know there's the DERA grants, there's the air monitoring grants, and I'm not sure that Newark is getting those. So we'll have to loop back on some of that grant funding. And then, of course, what to do with the data. But the other piece that I wanted to mention is on the waste recycling piece, because I do think the agencies and the community was great in highlighting this, that the agencies do think of this as recycling and therefore good, but we saw a lot of trucks and a lot of the emissions and the kind of the breaking down of the metals was just shredding and kind of airborne. So that was really, anyway, it was really helpful for me to see that, because I know that under bill or IRA, we got funding for waste. And I don't think that it's geared towards looking at some of those polluting recycling facilities, even though they are recycling. So it was really helpful to showcase that and for us to be on the tour and see that. So we'll be looking into that and coming back to you, certainly on the air monitoring piece, because I know that there's grants going out now for communities and municipalities to work together on that.
Candace, were there any reflections from the tour or with respect to the air quality concerns that Kim had mentioned that you wanted to offer a perspective on?
Yeah, Kim and Nikki were able to share some good ideas and some clever ideas about some pieces of policy that they're working on at the national level. And so it was good to hear that thinking, and to think about how the DEP in the state of New Jersey can be tacking on to some of those. And so I think we talked about like kind of a think tank of getting some people to brainstorm some ideas about not only just reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is where a lot of the conversation starts and stops, but also the toxic air pollutants that are also emitted by facilities and reducing those in addition to greenhouse gases. So looking forward to kind of thinking about that with our air quality director and his staff, and to lift up those ideas and bring them home into DEP.
They're really valuable that we get on the ground and have these engagements and see for ourselves the concerns and the issues. You know, earlier, I was about to say earlier in the year, and if time blends together, it was actually, I think 2 years ago, that the New Jersey Clean Air Council had evaluated the issue of fugitive dust. And because of concerns like that have been raised here in the city of Newark, but elsewhere around the state with respect to facilities that are largely outdoor, that are not subject to the same types of legal requirements and permitting requirements as a facility like a manufacturing facility or a power plant that has emissions control technology, but rather things like scrap yards or collection points for waste, like transfer stations that have dust emissions that aren't routinely captured and aren't really part of what we would call the traditional regulatory regime that's focused very much on the sources of emissions, the smokestacks you see, for a rough analogy. And the tour today brought that report back in my mind, because there were a number of recommendations there, Kim, that we should make sure that we're looking at again with our Environmental Justice Advisory Council, particularly as we begin this work of implementing the New Jersey environmental justice rules, because there was a lot of real out of the box thinking there. And that was a group composed of not just professionals, environmental professionals, but also industry folks, right? Who too know that we need to build a better way. And so that was just brought back to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I see someone else approaching the microphone. I also want to acknowledge that another official from the Office of our Attorney General has entered the room. Christina Brandt Young is in the Executive Office of the Attorney General, oversees the environmental portfolio, and an outstanding lawyer invested in this work. So get to know her.
Mhm.
Please. Hi, my name is Kaylin Bruno. I am here as the Chair of the Environmental Commission from Bloomfield. We are both, we have neighborhoods that are both considered overburden communities on through New Jersey's dashboard, and also disadvantaged through EPA's CGEST dashboard. And I know this because I'm a big dork for data and mapping. I just love it. I love diving into it. So, you know, I really like to give both of your organizations kudos for taking like a data-driven approach to environmental justice and looking, just kind of baselining where we are. But I guess my question is like, what's the next step with that? With those online tools, and also just from the previous question with getting these grants with air monitoring, like what are you doing with your data? Are you dashboarding it? Is it being shared with us as your neighbors to the north? And what can we do with that data? And take the next step, taking the environmental justice law further and being more protective.
There's a lot packed in there. So first, yay for data. Kayla, thank you for your interest there. Lisa, why don't I turn to you first for some thoughts on
Yeah.
the way that from
use
the
the
federal side, you're all working, as far as I
so
understand it,
cool.
I've seen, to really concretize the use of those tools
Yeah.
to deliver benefits to communities. And then I can add our
Okay.
part from the state level.
Saiu.
Great. So I have a little easier, job as far as this goes. So with EJC, with EJ Screen and CGEST and some of the other tools, mapping tools that you see come out of EPA and the White House, it's really driving the president's goal, President Biden's goal, to ensure that all agencies are working with disadvantaged communities and under the Justice 40 initiative, delivering at a minimum 40% of benefits and investments going to disadvantaged communities. And so the question becomes, okay, now we have this initiative, the federal government has to make sure that we know where the disadvantaged communities are. And that's where some of those mapping tools come in. And so with that, and let me just say that this comes from the communities. This is not something that EPA thought of. It was really driven by communities saying, not only do you have to have a policy on environmental justice, we want to see actions, and we want to make sure that there's accountability in delivering those benefits. And so the 40% or more is how we're tracking it. And so we use those tools to be able to say to our partners, the states, if we give you, let's say, state revolving funding for clean water investments or infrastructure, we then send guidance with it saying, I think we put for water infrastructure, I think it was 50% or more. And the great thing about New Jersey is they're delivering, and you can talk about that piece. But it was a mechanism for us to say, here's the federal funding, but you have to ensure that this funding is going to disadvantaged communities. And I know that New Jersey has their own map, and so the commissioner can talk about that, but that's how you begin to see not only the policy playing out, but how we're trying to track the actual dollars of investment to communities that need it the most. And you see that in guidance with our water, the clean water infrastructure, the drinking water state revolving fund, the lead service lines, our community change grants, a lot of the EJ grants, really ensuring that we are delivering this. We just announced the Solar for All grants, which is really kind of our it's a great new program for $7 billion to be delivered. And that is, again, I think it's 60 or 70% are going to disadvantaged communities. And so this is really how we begin to say, this is the policy, this is the initiative, but the way that we track it is through these tools that you mentioned, and the data helps us get there.
So I, again, can't state how much I appreciate the question and the focus on data, or the excitement for it. We just had Take Your Kids to Work Day, quick aside, everybody. So we just had Take Your Kids to Work Day, and it's sort of like, oh, we're going to demonstrate that DEP is the coolest place to work in state government, because it's true. Sorry to our law and public safety friends. So but one of the things that was most exciting, and I have twin 13-year-old daughters who came, is that our team took the kids, they separated them all into different groups, different interests. But one of the units you could choose was on GIS mapping and data analytics. And the excitement and the interest of the young people in using these tools in a way that maybe some of us of generations that are not 13-year-olds may not appreciate, and their ability to use it quicker and understand it is fascinating. You know, they could understand it much faster than I could have when these concepts were first introduced to me. So I say that only to offer that by putting these tools and data layers, whether it's on an EJ side or a water quality side, whichever we're talking about, out there for the public to use and engage with, I think we see greater uptake with each new sort of cohort that's coming along, right? And whereas, you know, maybe several years ago that wouldn't have been the case. So I think these are really important, but they're important if they're used, right? So we could farm all of the data that we have, measure in ways that we can verify pollution levels in communities, and make that information accessible to all of us. And it is accessible. Go on to Google and type in NJ EJ map. Seriously, you got a phone, take it, pop out your phone, Google NJ EJ map, MAP, right? And you will be able to find the New Jersey Environmental Justice Mapping, Assessment, and Protection Tool. And it takes information about stressors, environmental and public health stressors in the communities that we serve, and makes that available to the public, so you can understand the number of days your community spends with certain levels of ozone pollution, or the degree of impervious coverage in your community that contributes to your flood risk. And that becomes important not only as a powerful tool to inform the public, but then when we use it ourselves. And there's a lot of different ways that we are, to Kayla's question. So the first way is it is a component of enforcing our environmental justice law. It allows us to evaluate the baseline conditions in a community, so that when a new highly polluting facility is proposed, or an existing one proposed to be expanded, we can look at those baseline conditions and then compare that to, or look at that in view of new pollution that might be proposed for that community, to ask ourselves a critical question of how much is too much, and how much more should our regulated entities be doing to protect the public health and environmental quality of the communities that they too inhabit, right? That they are where their workers live, or where they are neighboring families and children. And then the other way that we use it is to help us deploy resources. A fine example, last week, Governor Murphy, who is my boss, and during Earth Week, we announced $117 million in new parks, recreational, and open space investments. Right? And whether a community is adversely stressed by pollution, enables a higher grant award or more preferential treatment in the type of grant that is awarded, because we know that environmental justice is not just about reducing pollution or avoiding new pollution, but about creating more environmental benefits. Right? And then it enables us to identify, also last week, Governor Murphy announced nearly $9 million in urban and community forestry grants to help communities, including Newark and Camden and others, to expand their tree canopy, right? And to provide grants for planting and for maintenance of those trees, because they help reduce heat island effects and soak up stormwater and all these other reasons. But it all comes down to the proposition of using the data we collect, not just collecting it for the sake of collection. Candace, if you have a thought.
Yeah, a couple of additional thoughts. So the data is only as useful as it is up to date, right? So just want to underscore that EJ map is regularly updated twice a year, every January 31st and July 31st for the underlying environmental and public health stressor data. So we have 26 stressors that gets updated twice a year. And then every other year, we update the demographic data from the census. So that is a keen prerogative of ours to keep our data up to date. In terms of your question about next steps for EJ Map, one of the things we're really excited about is expanding the tool to be a one-stop shop for multiple things beyond the implementation of the EJ law, including tagging along into EJ Map a way for you to see violations from companies. So the way that you do that now is you have to go to a completely different tool, which can be cumbersome. And so in the future, our data and IT teams are working on connecting that into EJ Map. So if you're concerned about a facility, you can also see the environmental pollution that exists around that facility, but you can see the violations that that facility may have. And you can click some links to get inspection reports and things like that. So really excited about that connectivity that we'll build into EJ Map pretty soon. And then the last thing I'll just say about data is that we do not have public health data in EJ Map. And that's intentional. It's all because of like HIPAA reasons. Our EJ Map is at the block group level. So that's the smallest geographic unit or the smallest scale of geography that the US Census provides data for. So you have a block group, you have a tract, you have a zip code, you have a municipality, a county, and a state. So we're at that very small granular level, and it's hard to get public data that's meaningful at that level. But I want to do a quick plug for healthy community planning. So if you Google healthy community planning NJ, there's a whole online website and portal and database where you can see public health data. So things like asthma and obesity and cancer rates are all in there, and you can see it at the municipal level. So definitely encourage Bloomfield and others who are interested in data beyond our environmental data to look at healthy community planning NJ.
That's a really, really, really great point. And I see we've got some speakers lined up, but not, and I don't want to sort of belabor the data analytics. Folks who are interested in it can talk to us more about it after we hear from the public. But there's a distinction between, I think one of the primary points you may be hearing is that there's a distinction between what is a public health stressor, right, that EJ Map measures, right, or articulates, and then what is a specific public health experience, right? So the EJ Map isn't going to have things like the asthma rate or a cancer rate. That would be in the healthy community planning. But precursors, right? The level of certain pollutants, that's an EJ
That
tag
may
thing
cause.
that may then relate to the public health
Mm.
outcome.
I'm just going to quickly plug, since we're heading into summer, airnow.gov. So last year, especially during the fires that we were, or Canada was experiencing fires, we were experiencing the bad air quality. Airnow.gov, you can type in your zip code. And a lot of that data is collected through the purple air monitors. So one of the questions was, what happens with the data from the purple air monitors? And so I just looked it up, but it has like current fire conditions, emissions, there's webcams from some of the air monitors. And so you can just type in your zip code, click it, and it says, get air quality data where you live. So that's.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Regina Towns. I am the ports organizer for the South Water Environmental Alliance. I'm also a former homeowner in the South Ward. I worked at the port for 31 years. I retired in 22, but while working there and now, there are a lot of issues that's not being addressed. The emissions, the ships are in violation all the time. We have no data, no monitoring. Longshoremen don't know what they're dealing with, some of them, right? They're dying of cancer. They have heart attacks. They have all these surgeries for open heart. It's very sensitive to me because they were my friends. I think on a level of the international need to be addressed, right? Because they're the ones that actually run everything with the longshoremen. The locals, we try to, but they listen to the international. So what can EPA help as far as informing the international that it's very important for them to put out this information, as well as us, SWIA, and also to get monitoring down there so they can see the levels that's being impacted while they work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. So first, I just want to hold that feeling that you have for a moment because it's important, right? The way that we experience our environment, right, and how pollution can affect us, the people, our health, the people we love, the communities where we live, work, learn, play, right? It's personal. I feel that. It's really personal. And I'm sorry that you lost people you love. I'm sorry. There's a couple of thoughts that it leaves me with. The first is that while an environmental governance entity like a DEP or an EPA doesn't have maritime authority, like you're referencing, right? We're not a maritime agency that can have power over international commerce and the ships in international commerce, but we do have power over emissions in our ports, right? And we do have levers to better govern the emissions of large vessels while they are docked. And so that is a point that we can and should be doing more on. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts and then turn it over from the state perspective and turn it over to Lisa, because there's a lot happening in the feds with respect to healthy airports. The first is last year, we enacted a suite of reforms to reduce pollution in our ports. One of them is on port and cargo handling equipment, right? And so we're now entering an enforcement phase for this law, or rather a regulation that we put in place to require the upgrading of some of the dirtiest diesel powered port equipment. And we are now entering an inspection phase to ensure that these cleaner engines are being put into use. There are greater problems with a lack of those upgrades in the southern part of the state than the north, actually. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey has a heavy hand in making sure that those upgrades are made to the cleanest diesel. The next step beyond that is to move us toward electrification and zero emission port cargo handling and vessel docking rules that would further reduce those emissions. It's a long view, right? We upgrade what we have in place, ensure that's cleaner operating as we begin to organize ourselves to take the next regulatory step to have zero emission. At the same time that we invest in that zero emission future. So partly through the advocacy of healthy ports and the work that our Bureau of Mobile Sources does, we have helped to bring new funding to Port Newark to get some of the yard tractors, for example, made electric. Kim and I actually were at Red Hook Terminal. It feels, sometimes I feel like, oh, it was yesterday, right, my friend? And then no, it was probably 2 years ago. But we got to keep that going, right? And it's got to be made a priority. So for example, next week I sit before our budget committee, right? I'm sure I'll be asked questions about environmental justice and improving the quality of air in our communities. And I'll tell our legislative partners the same thing, that we need to ensure that continuous investment because it's the only way that the airways get cleaner. I'll ask Lisa to chime in more.
Yeah, I would just add that EPA is also investing in healthier ports, cleaner ports, focusing on the equipment, like the commissioner was mentioning, increasing our grants for diesel emission reduction. Obviously, there's a suite of tools that we're using. One is the grants. We announced the $3 billion for clean and healthy ports, incentivizing the ports. And we know that New York and New Jersey port is definitely going to apply for that grant. And it focuses in on reducing emissions, but also tackling climate change. And how should I put it? There's, once again, the guidance is to benefit disadvantaged communities. And then we have rules that are coming out on heavy duty vehicles, which is trying to get to the truck traffic. So there's a suite of things that EPA is also doing and partnering with our states, with our local governments even though the initiative doesn't always talk about the health piece, but that's in the end what's driving it is really public health. That we understand that with these higher emissions, with the truck traffic, with all of the equipment on the airports and at the seaports, all of this is driving the emissions to go out, which is driving those health disparities. And so I really appreciate your words and the way that you started and the sentiment that this is about people. And this is about my friends, public health, and the people that I work with. So hopefully all these commitments and all these drivers will get to a healthier port. So we appreciate, obviously, your advocacy and participation.
Yeah, it really matters. And just to give some kudos to our partner and host, Ms. Gaddy, when we were beginning to develop our climate pollutant reduction regulatory changes under Governor Murphy's leadership to bring down climate pollution. One of the, bring down greenhouse gases, bring down methane, things that are warming the planet, which are different than the type of air pollution that harms our health, right? Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to warm the planet, but it's not going to poison our lungs in the way that soot from the tailpipe of large trucks does, right? And so one of the things that Kim was persistent about and made a real difference was in ensuring the inspection of the vehicles that historically have escaped inspection. And we plugged regulatory loopholes to get that done. And what that does is reduces nitrogen oxide emissions that harm our lungs, right? All of this takes time to play out, right? For us to feel that improvement. And sometimes the machinery of government can run slow, but those types of changes are happening because of advocacy. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Winifred Victor Hines, and I am the Executive Director of the Weequahic Park Association. I'm also on the Environmental Commission, but right now I am speaking for the Weequahic Park Association. And I don't know if it's a question, comment, all in one, but I'm glad that you did mention the data and also community engagement, and that you are trying, that you are attempting to do it. And just as Justice 40 initiative is also attempting it. But I think that you should cast a wider net. Why am I saying that? Because as the executive director of the Weequahic Park Association, we are left behind lots of times, okay? And we have been around for 30 years. And so we've been doing environmental justice before it was a thing. And we have the documents, we have the proposals, we have the articles, everything to show for it. So we are out there doing work. We are attending these meetings. We are sending out these proposals, but somehow, right, nothing is getting through. And so we've been audited past all audits, everything. And they've even said, a representative, a county representative, I forget his name, I think Ralph Chialella, has said that Weequahic Park Association is responsible for bringing in at least $82 million to the park. And that was years ago, okay? So, I mean, a people of color led organization, okay? So where's the crack? What is happening? How come we're not being engaged? How come we're not getting a seat at the table?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one thing that we should make sure to do is connect with one another, because you have a seat at our table. And one thing from a funding perspective that would be worthy of our getting together about is the opportunities to access parks improvement and open space funding as a nonprofit yourselves. And sometimes our programs as a state government will often flow directly to the municipal government or to the county government. There is a component of our Green Acres and Urban Parks programs that flow directly to nonprofit entities themselves. And so making sure that you're attuned to that and can engage with us to access those funds, because we don't often see those funds as fully subscribed. And so there's a lot of opportunity there that we can help you to access.
Yeah, thank you. I would just add that we would love to get your information and definitely stay in touch. So actually you're across from Drew, who is, oh, okay, yeah, at EPA. So, I mean, but part of and it's great that you spoke, because part of this, as the commissioner said at the beginning, is we recognize we need to be out and about to be able to meet people like you. So I thank you. And that's the point, that we want to, if you're not at the table today, then we hope you will be tomorrow, because the whole point is we have to go out and meet folks where they live, where they work, where they play. And it's not in our government offices that's going to happen. So, so definitely glad to be in touch. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Mark Roberts, and I do some work in Ironbound. I just had to ask a question. Now it's the summer months, and now it's because of global warming. When will we have an effective air monitoring system in the Ironbound? Because usually during the summer, it gets a little suffocating around there with all the environment pollutants of the chemicals and the airports.
Yeah.
When will be a more of an effective, so we could at least know what's in our air, so we could, how we could change it and fight against it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So Mark, one of the thoughts that I've been turning around in my mind since we were on our tour earlier today, in part sparked by the conversation between Lisa and Kim, is the opportunity we have to do community-based air monitoring in addition to the air monitoring system that the state runs itself. And just to maybe describe better what I mean by that. The state government has a certain type of air monitoring equipment that we have to utilize in order to measure things the federal government says that we have to, right? To characterize the conditions broadly across the state. There's not a lot of those types of air monitoring stations. Some are for criteria pollutants, others are for hazardous air pollutants. But I think what you're getting at has more to do with direct in-community citizen science, and then how we make these two systems talk to each other, right? So we are collecting localized air quality data from more mobile or handheld, even in some instances, devices, and then bringing that together in a data platform where you can look at them together, look at them individually. And there are folks in RDP who are working on how to get that calibrated the right way. And so we can take your information and circle back around on that. And they're often, I don't know if there's an open one now, Lisa, they're often air monitoring grants that come out so that community-based organizations can apply for funding from the federal government to expand access to those types of things.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, do we know if we have one for Newark? Usually we have a community partner with a university to be able to handle the equipment and make sure it's calibrated and stuff, but making sure that we're working with the community. And I know that we did have a round of air monitoring grants go out. They're about $500,000 for each community, but I don't know if Ironbound or Southport. Elizabeth got it.
Elizabeth did, okay.
Elizabeth got it. Okay. So which would, oh, that's right, because we were with groundwork. So Elizabeth received one, but we'll figure out when the next one is. I mean, given the tour that we took today and obviously all of the work in Ironbound that's going on, to figure out when the grants are going to go out again. So we'll look into that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that the spirit of your question about community air monitoring and how we get more of that and have that connect and link to air decisions, like policy-based decisions on air quality within the DEP, is an exercise that our Environmental Justice Advisory Council has been spending a lot of time on. So within our advisory council, we have an air working group, and there's a forthcoming pilot project about trying to get some community air monitoring in a couple of places. I'm hopeful that Newark, maybe the Ironbound will be one of them, but stay tuned on some of the work that will be coming out of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So, and I see you at the mic. We're going to get to you next, but we do have a question in the chat from Neil Seldman that is related to air monitoring. So I want to take this one next. And so Neil is asking, well, how about continuous monitoring for the Newark incinerator? Oregon requires this, why not New Jersey? So I don't know if you can speak to like requiring monitoring.
There is continuous air monitoring for permitted sources of air pollution under federal law and under state law. So that is in place. Maybe the question is um, ab- about air monitoring independent of the entity that is permitted? Maybe. I
Maybe.
invite the individual who asked to expand on that more, but there is continuous air monitoring of the Covanta incinerator, for sure.
And where does that air monitoring data from
So
an incinerator
as-
end up? How do we?
So as part of the oversight of the DEP, there is a permit that requires air monitoring, and the facility submits that air monitoring to the Department of Environmental Protection. And that information is publicly accessible.
Online.
Yep, it's all
Yeah.
online.
It's continuous emission monitoring.
And we could,
Stems,
if the
yeah.
requester wanted to put their information in the chat, we could make sure that we respond with a link to where to find that information.
Please.
Yes, my name is Mark Scotland, and I'm an Essex County resident, Newark-based business owner of a software and data analytics company within the automotive sector. Kim Gaddy knows our co-founder. Cher, I saw you today.
Just repeat your name for us.
Mark
Mark.
Scotland, like the country.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Okay. The transportation sector, #1 sector for greenhouse gas emissions, the volume of vehicles. So we're all very familiar with that. One of the most clandestine operations in history are vehicle emissions testing and compliance programs. Most of us know that, yeah, we have to take our vehicle once every 2 years. But how these programs run, how they're operated is very interesting and very inefficient. And the DEP and other studies through have highlighted many of the inefficiencies. I mean, testing a vehicle once every 2 years. What's going on with that vehicle the other 729 days?
Yeah.
So there is we were the first company to do a pilot with the state of New Jersey. When it came
To do what exactly?
it was to evaluate what's called a remote emissions testing compliance.
Oh, okay.
And
Just for the audience, I don't want us to only have this one directional conversation. For the audience, can you just explain what you mean by that so that everybody's understanding?
sure,
Okay.
it's the ability to have an emissions test without physically having to drive to an emissions testing facility. That's essentially what it is. And it's within the 31 states, they either test annually or biennial. So yes, it eliminates the need to have to physically go to inspection.
And it's something that exists on the vehicle itself.
Yes, that's right. There is technology. So by doing this, what we have been able to do is expand upon that. And my purpose for being here today is to make sure, I know the current program is currently sort of in flux. And I understand why these massive programs, there's all kinds of hurdles that have to go through before a new program comes out. But although we haven't been able to get a certain amount of traction in New Jersey, which we are now ready to do, we have gotten great interest in California. California Air Resources Board understands more about what we're doing and want to move forward with initiating a program like that. We also have relationships with automaker, with one of the largest independent automotive repair shops.
Just to put a finer point on what you're suggesting, and tell me if I have this wrong, is as a matter of policy to require, like we would an emissions standard for a vehicle, for a vehicle to have onboard emissions monitoring as well.
That is correct.
And so the proposition would be, in addition to saying these are the technical requirements that a vehicle's exhaust system must meet, right, to reduce pollution. It also should have real-time measurement of that pollution, just like the Covanta incinerator.
That's
Okay.
it.
I hear you.
So, okay, so that is our interest. And I also want to say this is tremendously important to environmental justice communities.
Yeah.
Because typically we can't play in the EV world because of the cost. But we can do this. We can have a vehicle that takes a test every day without us doing anything and be able to provide that information to individuals so they can self-evaluate how they're doing.
One of the things that I'd point out to you is that a lot of how we in the state of New Jersey regulate our vehicle emissions comes out of California, right? And maybe some of you have heard this before. You know, the idea of like New Jersey or New York, they're copying what California is doing. California says we're going to have zero emission vehicles. And so then New Jersey says we're going to have zero emission vehicles. The reason for that is because as a state government, you get a choice. You have two choices you can make as a state government when it comes to vehicle emissions. You can choose to follow the federal vehicle emission standards, which are set by the EPA and the US DOT, or you can follow the California approach. And the California approach is always stricter. In New Jersey, we follow the California approach. Legally, we're supposed to follow the California approach. That's what our state legislation says. So if you're getting traction, I offer that only to say that if you're getting traction with CARB, your next step would be to meet with the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission and the DEP.
Looking forward to it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just go back to something, please? I just wanted to go back to the incinerator for a second, or the Covanta waste to energy facility, depending on who you talk to.
Incinerator. It's an incinerator.
So, in January, EPA announced more stringent regulations for facilities across the country, and that these new regulations will include the Covanta incinerator here in Newark. There's one in Camden. Wrong.
Rowan.
Oh, we're wrong. And so the new regulation includes 9 separate pollutants that are being regulated by this action, and we expect the new standards to cut down on pollution and obviously reduce emissions. It says here, I'll just read this, including smog and soot, so the PM 2.5 we were talking about. Soot forming sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide by approximately 14,000 tons per year, improving air quality for overburdened communities. And so again, this is one of the drivers for EPA, is looking at disadvantaged communities, making sure that we're ensuring environmental justice kind of principles help lead the work that we're doing. And so that was part of issuing this regulation, because we know that a lot of EJ communities across the country, not just New Jersey, but across the country, we're pushing for more stringent regulations.
Is that a rule that's been proposed or has that been adopted?
That is proposed.
Thanks, Lisa.
And it was under the Clean Air Act standards for large facilities that burn municipal solid waste. So if anyone's interested, we can get you the exact link to that website.
Okay, so we're going to go back to you, Neil Seltman. I see you have your hand up online.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation and discussion. I appreciate it. I just moved to New Jersey. Excuse me. My question is, the Covanta incinerator emits a good deal of cadmium, lead, mercury, and so forth. And these are known killers, and there's no safe amount of pollution that is acceptable. And yet, it seems that the Covanta incinerator continues to go on. And in cities and counties across the country, there are citizen groups as well as government agencies undertaking transition plans to show how to shut down these incinerators. It's happening in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, Hennepin County, Minneapolis, Montclair, Montgomery County in Maryland. Is there any effort, or is there a possible way to work with the DEP to prepare such a transition plan for the Newark incinerator? And I thank you for this meeting and for your response.
Yeah, I appreciate the question very much. One of the things to think about here, Neil, is how our New Jersey environmental justice law and the rules that Lisa mentioned just celebrated their first anniversary will be applied to existing facilities. And so when permits for facilities, including existing incinerators, come up for renewal, they have to be evaluated under that environmental justice rule. And so that provides an inflection point for community participation in evaluating what the facility is proposing in terms of its operating future, right? And provides a point of engagement. The state government couldn't come into any facility and say you can't exist anymore. Right? What we can do is require that increasing levels of protective standards, right? Because as we progress, as technology progresses, we can better protect our environment and people's health. And so what our environmental justice law and rules do is lean into that and require regulated entities like an incinerator or any other major source of air pollution to pursue this path of continuing improvement in the pollution outcomes, which is a different way of thinking about things. Right? You might think, my kids think, oh, doesn't this already happen? No, that's not the way environmental law works. You get a permit, you operate it, you don't. Continual improvement isn't necessarily a path. Right now it is in the state of New Jersey, which is shocking to think about, but that's the way it works. And but the idea of our as a government planning the cessation of a private entity's operations, it's not really the way that it works. And from a government perspective, from an advocacy perspective, it's a whole other matter, right? This is your community. It should be the way you want it to be. And you should tell any operator, as well as your government, like you are here tonight, how you want it to be.
Well, again, thank you. I still don't understand the governments in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Delaware County, Pennsylvania, are in fact have developed transition plans so that when the contract for the incinerators in those respective communities are up, they will be shut down because of health impacts.
Yes. Okay, Mark, I'm understanding you a little better now. Okay.
Neil.
So, Neil. We had two Marks and a Neil. Okay.
Not a
Sorry.
problem. I appreciate how difficult it is.
Neil, now I'm understanding you better, because what you're talking about, I believe, is a county-run, a government-run incinerator. In the state of New Jersey, we do not have government-run incinerators at that capacity, right? The incinerators, the three that Lisa mentioned, that incinerate municipal solid waste are private companies. Right? And so in the state of New Jersey, every county has to plan for its municipal solid waste management, how they're collecting it, where they're sending it. Right? Many county and local governments run landfills, for example. But the incinerators here, which a county government might contract with to send some of its waste, are privately owned. I think that might be a distinction.
It is, and
in
thank you
what
very
you're-
much. Thank you for pointing that out. It is a distinction, and I now understand it. So thank you.
But one point to understand is that your county has a solid waste management planning apparatus, and it decides where it should send its waste. And you have a say in that as a resident, right? And whether your county is sending waste to an incinerator is something that you can weigh in on before your county government.
Thank you.
I was just looking up, but I just wanted to mention this because once again, environmental justice starts with community. The Baltimore, and I think you were mentioning this, I think this may be the one in Montgomery County. The community started that initiative or proposal and then created, used data to show the health impacts from that incinerator, and the community, and especially a young activist, I think she was 18, I forgot her name, won an award for working to protect the community and shut down that incinerator. So again, this type of work, working with communities and advocacy that folks do is super important. Once again, to highlight some of the issues and get government to act. And in that case, it was a municipal incinerator.
Just want to put a finer point and a plug on how you can act, especially in the context of the environmental justice law. In case people aren't familiar with this process, the commissioner was talking about that there is a point of engagement within our EJ process where the applicant, like an incinerator, when they're up for renewal every 5 years, has to hold a public hearing with the overburdened community that they're proposing to be operating in. And so that public hearing is where you can raise your voice, your concerns, ask questions, and have it be a part of the public record, what you think about that facility. And so we need community voices to be a part of that process so that the DEP can utilize that feedback and that input to set conditions within those permits. And so those conditions are things that help to reduce emissions towards zero or to help to recirculate truck traffic. We can do our best effort to set the conditions that we think will be protective of public health, but we are not experiencing the day-to-day experiences like you all are. So you can be lifting up and lending to us information about things that we should be considering, like dust and noise and odor and so on and so forth. So to stay attuned to that process, definitely connect with the Office of Environmental Justice through our website is the best way, nj.gov/EJ. And if you click on the attend a meeting tab, there's a bunch of information about how you can be attending these meetings, lifting up your voices and sending us good comments that we can utilize to strengthen the permits. Okay.
Still, are there more questions online?
Yeah, we're going to go to Stephanie Martinez next, who has her hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, we'll go to Stephanie and then I'll come back to you. Thanks. Yes, we can hear you, Stephanie.
All right, hi. Thank you so much, everyone, for holding this meeting. I'd first like to ask about the what is the communication with NJ Transit and the DEP? Recently, there was an increased fare hike that is going to affect a lot of low income, I guess middle class people that take public transportation every day. So I feel like this is going to affect a lot of people. And it might be like just a small increase right now, but those cents accumulate later on. And I take public transportation. I know almost everyone I know takes public transportation, and I understand that there's an increased hike that would guarantee service, but it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I see the difference between buses in like, let's say Hoboken and then coming to Newark. It's like run down. The buses like are in the highway stuck, and then it like takes more time for that commute to go back home. So I just wanted to know how, like, do y'all talk to each other? And also another transportation issue I was concerned about was the NJ Turnpike expansion that the Murphy administration like proposed. That's a $10.7 billion project that's going to bring more pollution and more traffic congestion and going to harm our EJ communities such as Newark. So yeah, I just wanted to know how the conversations go. I know there was already mention, I wanted to talk about more about air pollution, but you guys already mentioned that there's going to be more regulations on the power plants and incinerators, any new facilities coming up. But I also want to open the conversation up more to finding alternatives to, like, let's say composting programs, since the US like is discards more food than any other country in the world. I feel like there can be alternatives, especially like encourage more food gardens, since Newark is a food desert. And yeah, pollutions have no barriers. So even if it's just in Essex County, it's going to move to different parts of Jersey and eventually other states and stuff. So another thing I wanted to ask was about just what NJDEP like does to help with working conditions in like factories. Personally, like my mom has worked in the factory most of her life when she came here. So unfortunately, a lot of immigrant families suffer more of the consequences of climate change. So I would love to know how NJDEP like reaches out to any organizations that look into this. And lastly, I just wanted to ask if there was an update on the investigation in the lead line replacements in Newark. Like, is the lead service line that was like a 13% failure rate, is it not concerning? I am a volunteer at the Newark Water Coalition, and I would be there in the office, and a lot of people, even like officials from the city, like a lot of community members don't trust the water in Newark. So I was wondering, like, the update on that investigation and what the process is.
Thank you, Stephanie. You covered a lot of ground, my friend, and I am going to do my best. And I'm going to ask my friends here to pitch in.
Took notes, so I think I got it covered.
Okay. So with respect to your comments on transportation, I think what I'm hearing there, and what I often hear in these settings, because as Candace mentioned, we've traveled the entire state and holding engagement sessions like these. So what I hear in your comments and others is that environmental justice isn't just about the work that a Department of Environmental Protection or an environmental protection agency does, right? Because environmental justice is much more than just the quality enforcements that a DEP or an EPA makes. It's about how we experience our communities, and transportation is a big part of that, right? And if we don't have access to viable public transportation, then we don't have the opportunity to contribute to reductions in emissions in our own communities. So I say that only to offer that our environmental justice journey, it happens at every government agency, not just a DEP. I know we're the ones here, right? But you should raise your environmental justice concerns to your Department of Transportation, to New Jersey Transit. They have people who will hear you. We are the ones here, but they are available to you as well. And we can certainly share your contact information, but engaging with your representatives in those institutions is a worthwhile thing to do. You had a point about power plants in there, but I couldn't grab it. But then you, I think I caught it. Okay. But then you went into, from power plants, you mentioned food waste reduction. And one of the things that I'd point you to there, Stephanie, is that two things, one from DEP, but EPA also put out a new hierarchy in how we evaluate our waste reduction and food waste endpoints. That's really worthwhile. We have a program in New Jersey called Erase Food Waste, where we're working on food waste reduction planning. So if you put your information in the chat, we can get that information to you. Your comment about working conditions in factories, it's not one that the DEP has experience or authority in, but again, the work to further the promise of justity and the value of equity and fair treatment is one that every government entity owes you and everybody we serve. So talking to your representatives in the Department of Labor about that would be worthwhile, and we can make a connection for you there. And so I think that brings me to lead service line investigations. I think I hit Turnpike expansion with New Jersey Transit, and we can make a connection point to Department of Transportation as well. One of the things you mentioned about lead service lines, Stephanie, if I heard you right, was you put a percentage on a failure rate of lead service lines. And I wanted to point out that that is not the case. There has not been a point where we believe that there is a failure rate that is of significant concern in the city of Newark. What we have found are instances of work that was not as complete as it should have been. I continue to have faith in the quality of drinking water in the city of Newark, and I think that you should too. And I know that in points in our past, some of that faith was broken, and we owe you, your government owes you, and I know that the mayor shares this sentiment to renew and to solidify that faith consistently. The city of Newark has no violation of a standard for lead exposure now, right? The city of Newark has optimized the corrosion control treatment that is applied throughout the distribution systems to protect the water quality, even though
And just
the lead
explain what that
service.
means.
What's that?
Explain what that means.
Yeah. So what that means is, I know we went on this endeavor in record time to replace all lead service lines in the city of Newark, something that Newarkers should be really proud of it. No one in the country has matched your grit and perseverance and commitment to getting that done. No one. And even though all those lead service lines were removed and replaced, the reality is that the lead service lines contain the overwhelming amount of lead found in drinking water, but in-home plumbing can also contain lead. And so what that means is that the water system has to continue to provide treatment throughout the distribution system that protects the leaching of lead from any part, right? Meaning any lead that could remain because a contractor didn't completely remove everything he or she should have, or because your home is older and may have lead solder in your interior piping. So there is a corrosion control treatment that gets introduced during the process at the water treatment plant. And that corrosion control treatment is applied throughout all of the water system and has been verified over and over again to be protective. And that's really important and gives us further confidence because it protects you even if there may be some remaining lead component that wasn't completely removed. And to be clear, we're doing a citywide assessment of this issue. We are not finding a citywide problem. And because this is an enforcement investigation, all of those details aren't yet available. But as soon as that investigation is concluded, all of those details will be made available. And those who might not have done their job completely as they should have, make no mistake that they will be held accountable. Because in the state of New Jersey, you must, when you are replacing a lead service line, replace every component. Right? And so what we've seen is some components, maybe as big as this pencil, could have been left behind, but it's not found throughout the city that way. They're discrete locations, which we're not sharing because your privacy is important to us. But when the investigation is complete, all of that will be shared. And what we're finding so far gives me confidence in that continued protection. I know that it gives the mayor confidence as well. And we'll continue to provide updates in the weeks ahead as that investigation unfolds. But again, we are not seeing this as a citywide problem. And it certainly is not a crisis of any kind, right? One thing that's important, I think, for everyone to understand is that you live in the state with the strongest drinking water protections in the country, right? The strongest in the country, because we have leading scientists at our DEP who develop standards that protect you from things. Folks will ask me if should I drink bottled water? My goodness, no. You don't know where it comes from. My goodness, no. Right? You should drink the water that comes out of your tap. That you want to have a home filter, by all means, feel free. But we invest a lot of scientific resources, financial resources, because your health is important. And that's why we have the strongest protections in the country. And I think you can have confidence. And if you weren't able to have confidence, I'd tell you because that's my job.
Please, and while you're walking to the mic, I just want to make a correction to that URL from earlier. So it's dep.nj.gov/EJ, which will take us to our EJ page. And then you want to put another /meetings to get the list of the public hearings that you can attend. So dep.nj.gov/EJ and then /meetings.
Awesome. Maggie Freeman, Weekly Park Sports Authority. Nice seeing you all again. So we do fundamentals of sports in Weequahic Park, and this environmental impact that's kind of causing health hazards in our youth and seniors and all the entire population alike. What correlation is kind of established in linking those healthcare concerns with the actual bodies that are inhabiting the air pollution, the trucks, the emissions? Like, we're kind of hitting from the top to the bottom and around, and we're kind of a cloud of, it's a cloud of dust, smokes, and all these things are happening. So it's like, how are we educating and also providing support for families that just can't afford to add on those extra costs to make sure they're screening for these things, and how are we kind of educating the youth, nonprofit organizations, like how are we empowering from the DEP standpoint to make sure that the message is clear? We need to work harder to protect ourselves, because I know that Kim is doing great work with the air quality, but it's just like more needs to, we need, it's causing a lot of issues. We have like a large population on dialysis, kidney disease, heart disease, strokes, all these things are present, and the correlation is not there with the DEP the health community. And so, all these things have to happen. We need to move the needle forward a little faster than what's happening.
I think one of the things I might point back to, and thank you for that, is Candace's reference to healthy community planning. Because I think that's a gateway to understanding some of the conditions as the state government sees them from the perspective of the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Protection. And if you were to go to the healthy community planning site, you would be able to find the reporting for your community, but then also resources to support some of the issues that for which the conditions you're mentioning are risk multipliers, right? So, for example, if you live in a community that has a higher degree of certain air pollutants, there's a correlation oftentimes between that and whether you may have your community might also have risks from say lead in paint in homes, right? And so the healthy community planning reports are a good place to collect all that and then link. They provide links to supportive programs. So, for example, on lead abatement in homes, separate from drinking water, right? Lead paint is a far greater risk to health than or lead-laden dust, for example, than lead in drinking water. And there are a lot of resources for lead abatement that could be accessed. Information about the healthy community planning would also lead you to information about the frequency or intervals at which young children it may be appropriate for them to be tested for certain precursors to illnesses, and that type of resource is available through healthy community planning. So I think that's a good place to kind of start to answer your question. And then from the environmental perspective, I think it's important for us to hear comments like yours because and to see those conditions because we drove through and made stops in communities that are affected by the fugitive dust, which you made reference to, because seeing that helps us understand the extent that it travels, right? So it could be getting farther than is represented by an entity who seeks a permit. So helping to see that and understanding that on the ground is really important. And then I think the last thing I'd point out is that when you're experiencing a condition that you think is adversely affecting your health and environmental condition, this doesn't seem right? There's an app you should have on your phone called Warn DEP. And you can go to the App Store and you can download it. And it allows you to report to us right away. You can take a picture of what you're experiencing because sometimes these conditions are temporally limited. But if we know when something's happened, we can then work with that entity that may have a permit from us and say, well, this community member experienced an odor they think's coming from your community, your facility at this time, or dust at that time. What were your operations at that time? It could help us to pinpoint what created that experience. It's not always possible to pinpoint, but having that real-time information, super important. So if that's a point of information that we'd share. And then I'd say get on Candace's listserv too, because she's sharing information out like this all the time that can help empower our communities. Lisa, thoughts from your end?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll just add that I know that a few of the things that we've been talking about, it just seems like it's all piecemeal and it's just the way the government works. So the regulations on the incinerator and then the grants for solar and the money for clean water infrastructure or upgrades to water infrastructure, removing lead service line. It's all getting to that aspect again, as I mentioned, just driven by our commitment to improve public health. And it's definitely going at government speed. It's not going quickly, but hopefully we're really beginning to see the changes and the benefits. One thing that I did want to mention is in kind of working with communities and trying to look at this holistically. One of the things that we just did is issue a government to government grant to Newark And I think it says here that the award's going to be given in June, but we would love to get a few of you engaged in that discussion of how it's going to be used, because it's meant to reduce some of the climate change impacts. And obviously there's a host of health issues related to that. So it does talk about training, dealing with the urban heat island, tree canopies, green infrastructure, air quality, and occupational safety. So there's a lot that they're going to be looking at, both in the educational piece and then implementing some of the funds to do activities. So I just want to make sure that we do get your information and maybe take some folks from the list to have that work move forward. And as they're thinking of implementing the funding, what type of projects would the community be interested in? I think that'll be really good. Thanks.
Yeah, and just last point about healthy community planning. If you just Google healthy community planning NJ, there are tutorials on how to use the whole website and download the reports, and some good information about how to use the website. So look out for the tutorials if you're interested in exploring more, and come see me afterwards so I can show you how to download the report for Newark. Okay, please.
Okay, I'd like to simply thank you all for being here, participants included, to have this discussion and taking concerns back to at the government level to better understand the pulse of the community. My particular interest is food management, which to me is a critical component as we look forward to incineration or landfill. Both are unsustainable going forward. There's no question. There's more of us, people, going to be on this earth in 5 more years, but we're dealing with a stable piece of space. Something's got to give. When I talk about food management, waste management, we look at commercial entities that significantly dispose of 34%, because there's a blemish on a piece of fruit, so it's not acceptable. So off it goes. And we're talking tons and tons of materials that either end up at a landfill or an incinerator. My suggestion, and first of all, I'm Nick Joanno. I'm a councilman in the township of Bloomfield, and I've had the privilege and honor of serving my community for the last 16 years. And I'm honored to be here with you and to share my historical intuition and experiences in dealing with government on a personal level. So when we talk about food waste management, we're talking about simply, as Stephanie mentioned, the key word is composting. How we take what's on the curb, which is about 30% water weight. So think of the removal process is about $3 million a year for our community. We can cut that back to a third because we're paying for disposal of water, redirecting that food waste into composting. Composting is simply taking food waste, returning it. The technology is available on a community basis. It doesn't have to be trucked from out of the community lines, can be done internally. We can save the dollars to needy communities that we know that are simply, it's not there. If I can say I can save 20 to 30% of your tax bill, be environmentally sustainable, there's no downside. I would like to see both at the state and federal level additional emphasis, opportunities for grants to be made available, because there are regulations that are somewhat daunting that I don't want to say prohibit, but are very challenging to individual communities to embrace the concept of composting on a local level. And I say local. Once you start trucking it, it loses all the benefit both of carbon footprint and the fact that the benefit is declining. And the key is to do it locally within our community And going forward, as we, as individuals in our homes, begin to multiply, sell that product, and the composting can turn right around and be part of fertilizers, part of community gardens. There's a win-win all the way around. So I am encouraging, requesting at a federal level that we look at the regulations that are currently involved. And let's look at making them realistic for communities to embrace. Looking at both state and federal levels, making monies available as an incentive to lure communities to get away from those $3 million a year trucking fees to haulers, to the incinerator, to the landfills. Those folks are running out of space, let's face it. And if we want to decrease what's going into that incinerator and burning, we can do it right within our own communities. That's my concern. That's my advocacy that I share with you, and ask that you take that and run with it. And let's hear back from you all as to what you can do to better serve every community within this state. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Nick, that was terrific. And I very much appreciated it. It's good to see you again. Nick came to preach y'all of like big structural change. Let's just disrupt the solid waste industry. Let's do it ourselves. I think it's fantastic. The prompt, Nick, that you're sharing about trying to make it easier for communities to embrace composting. I don't know that everybody is sort of on the same wavelength as you here. I think what Nick is referring to is that the way that we go about managing waste is based on this assumption, because the laws are from the 70s and the 80s, that everything is going to get picked up. It's going to be all picked up together, and it's all going to go to a landfill, right? And so we attempt to regulate waste, including food waste, in this sort of large setting. And we're not thinking about separating food waste, or at least in the 70s and the 80s when all this was built, we weren't thinking about separating food waste from all the other municipal solid waste, right? And doing that is highly beneficial. And so one of the things that we can do, and the legislature isn't here yet, is look at how the regulatory treatment it is applied, because it's sort of the rules are built to, if you're putting waste somewhere, whether it's in a community compost or someplace else, it's a solid waste facility, and there's lots of things that attach to doing that, right? But we grew up, we environmental agencies grew up thinking everything's a landfill, but everything doesn't have to be a landfill, I think is your point. And I hear that loud and clear. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We will definitely take that back. I know there's a few communities asking for the federal government to step up, and I'd probably say it'll start out as an incentive, not a regulation, but but we are trying with some of our solid waste. What's the Swiffer grant stand for?
Yeah.
For recycling, yeah. Solid waste. This is Olivia
Feel
Glenn,
stuck in there. Thanks,
the
Lynn.
chief of staff at Region 2. Thanks. But yeah, we're starting out with some of the grants around that and those incentives. And, some of you may know New York City is trying to mandate composting, and some people are like, I don't want worms in my house. So there's also an educational component to it to get moving on it. But thank you so much for that.
Good evening, Douglas Freeman, representing Weequahic Park Sports Authority. I'm the president of the organization, and I'm also representing the Weequahic section of the Southwood of Newark. For over the years, I have noticed that we have these types of meetings, and there's certain things that's promised. Then there's different administration that comes in. So, I'm have a few questions. One is, what are the measurements that's going to be put in place to protect everyone's information, to make sure that if a new administration comes in, that these things continue, because we're talking about the future. Basically, by the time all of these different ideals come into light, we all be dead and gone. So we're talking about the children's children. There's a few sites that we were a part of, I believe like 10, 12 years ago. One was a brownfield that's at 77 Meeker. It has turned into an illegal dumping site. We have had it closed. They had like 2 different sites. There's different chemicals and all of these different things, right? So when we talk about air pollution on this one site, that's across the street from Weekway Park, right? So if that catches on fire, not only is it going to bring harm to our firefighters because they don't know what type of chemicals and what type of illegal things that was dumped on this site. It's been sitting there for about 4 years now. It's been closed for about a year. So this site at 77 Meeker Avenue, we want to have addressed because it's kind of contradictory to say that we have open land that a park where like 200,000 people are coming to. And then across the street, there's chemical waste in the air and all these different particles that the kids and the people from the community have to breathe. The other one is follow-up. The EPA checked the Weekway Park Lake. There wasn't no records of what actually was in the lake. The county gave them permission back 2014, 2015 to come check that. We don't have the results from that particular one. The Superfund site, which was a white chemical site, they knocked it down.
Can you say the name of that again? The what chemical site?
White chemical company.
White chemical site.
Yeah, so that one had over 10,000 drums of contaminants that leaked into the aquifer, and they knocked the building down. But the last time we spoke with the EPA, they was on phase 3, and then there was phase no more. So then nobody came back to the community. If not for Kim Gaddy and her organization, we wouldn't know a lot of these different things that were still going on because we do different roles in this community of the Southport of North. So some people do environmental, some people do environmental justice, and then there's some other components that's put into this. But at the end of the day, as the NGOs and as community organizations, we have to have one site or group that we're dealing with. And so far it has been the Southport Environmental Alliance. And I agreed to that. A lot of us agreed to do this with Kim Gaddy's group. She lost her son to asthma. These are things that are real. We have people with kidney disease. We have all these different components in the Southport. So basically what I want to get at right now is what is the outcome of these meetings? Because we don't want to put grant money to it because like I told you down in Camden, that's a money grab. So we want to make sure that the groups that are actually doing the work are going to bring it forth to the community so that we can tell our children's children of the success that we have done in America and in the state of New Jersey and Essex County. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that very much, very much. So with that, I know Lisa shares this, but from our perspective in the state of New Jersey, right? We don't sit down and call these types of meetings and ask you to be generous with your time, right? For just no reason, right? We don't believe that you come out and you engage with a community for the sake of engagement, but instead that you engage with a community for the purpose of action, right? And so that means different things depending on the issue. So, for example, you're saying that you're not sure what's in what testing revealed about the lake. Well, one thing that we can do is to we have a organization within the DEP called the Bureau of Water Monitoring. We can ask them if they've done monitoring of that lake and what those results are and make sure that you get them, right? That's what I mean by the purpose of action. Because you can come here just to offer your opinion and for it to go out the other side of my head, right? And so that's one example. And another is you're mentioning that a facility closed down and you're worried that there are chemicals still there, that there was an operating facility and that chemicals may have been left there? Okay. Right. Ah, okay. Sure. And so I think the first thing that we can understand is whether that site is capped, is that a site where the EPA was the lead the agency doing the cleanup? Was it the DEP of the lead agency doing the cleanup? And get you the answer to your question, because there is an answer, right? And there's no reason that you shouldn't have that answer. It is knowable and we can give it to you, right? And then on the Green Acres piece, I'm happy to have an appointment scheduled for your organization so that you can understand how that program works and how it could serve you, right? And that's what we mean by engaging for the purpose of action. Like there are outcomes, right? This conversation that we're having today doesn't end today, right? We're not doing our jobs if it ends today. And in terms of your question about what happens when there's a new administration, I'm going to give you my honest answer is that I don't know, but I know that there is a very powerful element in that room, and that is your collective will to make sure that whoever sits in chairs like these after us, they hear you too. Right? Because regardless of who leads an administration or some entity, they serve you, right? They serve the people of the state of New Jersey, no matter who they are.
Yeah, thank you so much. So on just piggybacking on that, the other thing that we are trying to do is to embed the work in everything that we do in our different agencies. So it's more difficult to just yank away. And one of the things that I'm working with Olivia on and others that in Region 2 is creating a new office of environmental justice and community engagement, hiring people in. And so it's an established office. There are people working there and the relationships remain whether or not or Olivia and I are here. And it's much more difficult to say, okay, well, now that Lisa's gone, no more community engagement, because we have people on staff at EPA who will be doing this work. And so that's one way that we're trying to do it, is to take some of the funding that came out of Congress to do environmental justice work and other things to really establish that commitment throughout EPA, regardless of the administration. On the white chemical site, why don't we stay in touch so I can give you the exact update? But one thing that I do have in my notes, because we had a feeling it would come up, is that it has been, EPA did complete the groundwater remedial design in September of 2016. And now the site was a recipient for bill funding, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law funding, which means it's an orphan site, right? Which means there was no principal party to clean it up. But now we're using new funding that came in to go in and say EPA will take care of this. And so we're using the bill funding to do the remedial work or to resume the remedial work. And as a result, there's an updated remedial design for groundwater that was completed in last May, and we're going to be starting the activities in early summer of 2024. So let's make sure that we get your information, so that you can have like a fact sheet that explains all of this, because this is just notes for me. The one thing I do want to say is I know I don't know if there's anything we can do about this, but the former white chemical, the tenant from that property and the adjoining property do plan to use the site as a long-term parking lot. And that's probably why it's capped. So, yeah. So we can, I know. So there's a lost opportunity to work with the community on what it should have been, and so maybe there's a way to yeah. Exactly. So I knew. I'm like, I'll be honest with you, but I knew it wasn't going to be good news, but I have to just deliver the news.
Okay, so we was promised hotels, bowling alleys, and all these things on Freeland Heights Avenue.
Okay.
But what we got in turn was warehouses and trucks.
Okay.
So now you telling me it's going to be a parking lot. Is that it's not for cars, because right now the train station hasn't been built yet.
Yeah.
For the transfer. So now you're talking about more trucks. So where's the community benefits agreement that we need to be planning?
Yeah.
Because we don't need all of these trucks.
Yeah.
We need nights, tourism. We need all these different things in our community.
Okay.
We do not need trucks, scrap cars, and all of these other items. So, we want to have this
Yeah,
conversation.
no, let's
Yeah.
do that because it
Yeah.
is being opened up again
Okay.
and planned. So let's talk about it. Yeah. So that's it. That's why. So, see, it's good to come out and have these conversations. Yeah. Bye, Kim.
So with that, I do want to wrap us up at this time. I'm getting the cue that we have to be out in a few minutes, that the library is closing at 8:15. So I do want to thank all of you for coming, for telling us about your concerns, asking questions, and just this point of engagement. It is so, so important. So to your question about outcomes, another outcome that is so important is just the relationship building, so that you all know that we exist, that our staffs exist, and that you have people within government that you can be connected to for further conversation and discussion. And so, like the commissioner said, this discussion need not end tonight. You know who we are. We now know who you are. And so we have a bunch of notes and follow-ups that we've taken down to make sure that we get information back to you all. So we'll be eager to do that when we get back to our offices. But thank you for showing up. Thank you to all of you online. And I'll pass it to Commissioner and Regional Administrator for your last thoughts before we wrap up.
I just want to say thank you, right? We come into the communities that we serve to hear from you all. You're being generous with your time in sharing your perspective with us. It's our job to make sure that was meaningful, that your time was worth it. And we'll do that. And sometimes, as we just learned, the government doesn't always have an immediate answer or the best answer, the answer you want to hear. But they sure as hell owe you an answer. Always. And I thank you for being here. And I hope that you've signed up to be on the listserv for our Office of Environmental Justice. Candace and her team are terrific. And we'll close the loops. And if there's something that you wanted to ask, you were online or you're here in the room, and maybe you didn't want to stand up at the microphone, right? We have an email inbox, right? You can grab one of us in the hallway. But thank you for joining us, and thank you to Kim, to the library, and certainly to our friends at EPA. And I'll turn it to Regional Administrator Garcia for her closing words.
Great. Thank you so much. I also just want to say thank you to everyone for spending your evening with us and your time. But it is really important that we do have these conversations. And as we're all saying, build the relationship so that we understand the issues and how we can work together to resolve or find solutions. Sometimes, exactly, we don't have the right answer, but is there something else we can do? And what we usually do is we just take this information and then go back and split up, see if there's information we have, New Jersey DEP has, maybe another partner that we have that can reach out. So there will be some follow-up to this. And obviously with some of the cases mentioned or the sites mentioned, we can follow up with information right away. So we will do that.
And speaking of follow-up, if you are in the room, please make sure that you have signed the sign-up sheet so that we can stay connected with you and circle back to you for a particular follow-up that you raised. Please sign the sign-up sheet. And our email address is environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov. So environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov. Feel free to see me. I'll be here a few minutes after, and my staff at my left, at your right. Thank you so much for all your support, and my left over there at the sign-in table. So with that, we'll close you out and have a good night.
Thank
Thank
all.
you so much.